Hello and welcome to the program. It's just gone 6:01 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time and 7:01 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time in Glasgow. This program is being broadcast from the land of the Camaragal people, and we acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. And we particularly welcome many First Nations people who have joined the program today. The United Nations meeting, as I have observed on a number of occasions over the last 18 years that I've been fortunate enough to attend them, is a combination of diplomacy, trade show, and, it has to be acknowledged, a circus. UN climate change conferences are the largest meetings on the UN calendar. It's a major event in any year, and this year especially, particularly after almost 2 years of working online and staying close to home. It feels a much bigger deal than usual. It's a meeting with several moving parts, from the World Leaders Summit on the 1st to the 2nd of November, to the technical negotiations that are critical to completing the operating manual for the Paris Agreement. They are all work and spectacle, hopefully fruitful in their outcome and not the disagreements that we have seen in the past. Meanwhile, the host city, Glasgow, is expecting highs of 11 degrees Celsius and lows of 2 degrees Celsius and a lot of rain during the first week of COP, although you can't tell it from the slide behind me. Perfect weather for negotiations, one would think, but not necessarily perfect if you are in fear of contracting COVID. The delegates, which at the last count are expected to be in the order of over 25,000 people and 190 countries with delegates being represented, must feel the most enormous pressure to invent, debate, deliberate, and ultimately agree to striking significant goals. At the same time, these people are no more than national representatives. We must remember that. They are your representatives, and they are assigned to work for national interests. So this balance between national interest and global good will have to be found. The case will need to be made that in Glasgow and all over the world for that matter, that the nations that decarbonise fastest will do the best in the coming century. As it stands, all carbon reserves on Earth are now stranded assets. According to the modelling work recently published in the journal Nature, the facts are emphatic. If warming temperatures are to remain below 1.5 degrees Celsius, then 89% of coal reserves and 58% of oil reserves and 59% of gas reserves identified must stay in the ground. So for those who move first to zero out emissions, they'll be the first to get a more viable, inclusive and resilient economy and an environment in which humanity can inhabit and thrive. And yet, as we can see from the UN Sustainable Development Goals, all aspects of sustainability, whether that's environmental, social, or economic, are interconnected. So over the next 11 or possibly 12 days, there will be events on and headlines regarding a huge spectrum of topics, from aviation to the Amazon rainforest, clean tech to carbon offsetting, and energy to social security and equality. These official negotiations in and of themselves are a complex process with 5 work streams and at least 100 agenda items. And if you add on the events that are hosted by national governments, NGOs, academia, businesses, and all manner of other groups, then the scope of discussion points is extensive, to say the least. It's a huge moment for many stakeholders, including the business and private finance sectors. And there will be many key issues on the table as delegates discuss how to secure net zero by mid-century to keep 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming within reach. Businesses are particularly interested in this COP in outcomes in three core areas, and they are the carbon market mechanism under Article 6, climate finance, and the role of nature-based solutions, to name but a few. But what exactly do we hope that will be achieved from this enormous gathering? Discussing the very future pathway of humanity. How can we ensure that we get the most out of it? And more importantly, how as you, the audience, can get the most from the COP and this particular session? Well, let's have a quick primer, shall we? One of the interesting things about this COP that sets it apart from almost all others is that there is a brand new narrative, that is net zero by 2050. A COP, by its very nature, is an interesting and complex beast, as we've said before. These negotiations have been taking place since 1995 at COP1 when it was held in Berlin. This year's summit, number 26, which technically should be number 27, and the global gatherings have grown over the years. An estimated 25,000 people, as I've said, are expected to descend on Glasgow for COP26. These summits happen every single year, but obviously except for last year. But COP26 in particular is a special one because it marks the first 5-year interval of the post-Paris Agreement and a deadline for countries, including Australia, to demonstrate tangible progress. Countries must agree legally binding emission reduction actions and emerge with documents that outline how those ambition is going to turn into concrete action. Countries also need to have set new climate commitments ahead of the summit and acted on those pledges. But how do countries actually reach the goal? Well, in a word, further emissions reductions. Countries who signed the Paris Agreement have agreed to update and strengthen their targets every 5 years. These targets are known as nationally determined contributions. But the current targets aren't anywhere near where they should be. And in fact, many countries are going entirely in the wrong direction. The world is currently on track for nearly 3 degrees of global warming by 2100, which could have catastrophic environmental, social, and health consequences. And that word catastrophic is not an exaggeration. In fact, look out on the 4th of November, which is Energy Day, for possible announcements and signatories to the UN's No New Coal Pact. And on November 10th, Transport Day, where there's probably going to be some further announcements about gas and diesel car ban pledges. What's the most effective way to reduce emissions? Well, as the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has helpfully outlined for us all, his 4 aims for the COP are cash, cars, coal, and forests. That means wealthy nations handing over money already promised years ago to developing countries will come through. And there's a speculation that that actually won't happen until 2023. The ditching of gas and diesel cars, and that seems to be well on the road to progress. The stopping of the burning of fossil fuels, which is fleeting, and the planting of trees and protection of biodiversity is an interesting one because it is entered into the dialogue of the conference, particularly as we've just seen the recent COP15 in Kunming deliver some interesting outcomes, albeit part 1. And then, of course, China, being the world's biggest emitter, recently agreed to stop funding coal plants in other countries, but it does still burn coal domestically. So countries' targets must be backed up by actionable policies, or there's just going to be a lot of hot air, literally. And let's not forget what we're talking about in terms of numbers. The 2.6 to 2.8 degrees Celsius is the current trajectory of global warming above pre-industrial levels, whilst the Paris Agreement aims for 1.5. 0 is the net global emissions proposed by 2050 to avert catastrophic warming. 195 countries have now signed the Paris Agreement and did so in 2015. And I've put it there twice to emphasize it. 216 people around the world in developing countries will be displaced because of climate change by 2050. 20 world leaders are already descending on Glasgow. And as an interesting numerical fact, it's 600 plus days since Chinese President Xi Jinping last left the country. He's not expected to come to COP, and it would appear that he's not going anywhere soon. So let's get on board. Now, what you need as an attendant to the COP is an ability to get into the COP. And what I've given you is, unfortunately, an example only, but I thought I'd write out for you your pass, your entry into this year's Climate Change Conference. I filled it out for you. I've said that your date of birth is mind your own business, that your document identification number is 007, and that your country or nationality is you are a child of the world. So let's dive straight in with our pass into the COP. And here are some pictures that have been taken at the conference centre only in the last 36 to 48 hours. You'll see in the top left-hand corner, the main entrance. In the top right-hand corner, we're going to hear very soon from somebody who's just had to go through that process of getting registered. In the bottom left-hand corner are already delegates that have been registered and are now attending the COP. And yesterday, the 31st of October, was technically the first day of the conference, which is traditionally seen as the soft day, because it deals with all of the administrative processes. And you can see the vast room, and interestingly, very few people. So very few people that are physically present. You would look historically at seeing at least triple the number of people in the room at this particular point in time. Now, important people to look out for. Top left-hand corner is the chair of the IPCC. Top right-hand corner is the outgoing president of the COP25, which was hosted by Chile. The bottom left-hand corner is Alok Sharma, who is the UK COP president. And of course, in the bottom right-hand corner is the head of the UNFCCC, Commissioner Espinosa. What you're going to need to know is that this is going to be a very exhausting 2 weeks. And as you'll see on the screen, you are here at day one. There are a number of themes and issues and debates and discourses that will go on throughout the 2 weeks. The World Leaders Summit, of which Prime Minister Morrison is now in Glasgow for the purpose of the COP, and it is expected he will be speaking, one understands, on the 2nd of November, and we'll share that with you all as and when we hear further. But there is also a lot of negotiation that is still yet to occur, and there is a lot of information that is to be shared, and there are a lot of themes to be discussed and debated, including the race to zero, which you will hear more about over the next 2 weeks. But what I then thought I'd share with you is what your program is going to look like, or mine, over the next 2 weeks in the twilight hours. So in other words, because this COP sits at a very different time zone, the challenges in relation to keeping up to date with what is being debated and discussed, even on the sidelines, is exhausting. And I don't expect you to be able to read this slide terribly well. I know I can't. That's why I've got the glasses. But it's interesting, and I've highlighted in purple a couple of upcoming events that you might be interested to keep a track on. The first, obviously, is today, on the 1st of November. There are 2 events by the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction on a topic of navigating the transition to zero carbon buildings. The International Chamber of Commerce is hosting a 12-day festival of activities and sideline events that you can dial in, live stream, and watch without cost. Very impressive program of work, and I would strongly encourage you to go and have a look at the ICC website to catch up with what's going on there. Equally important, the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network is going to have a 5-day conference on zero emission solutions. And it's highly interesting and relevant to look at that program of work because it's very grounded in the Sustainable Development Goals. From our part, the WBCSD has an important program of work on greening the grid. And the first program, or the first project, will be launched today, called Greening India's Power Grid. And it's something well worth watching, not just because of its potential relevance to Australia, but also the opportunity for business and finance in Australia to support the opening up of India's grid to green. I also want to highlight 3 others that are member-oriented events. The first being our very own Mary Stewart, the CEO of Energetics, will be speaking tomorrow night, our time, in a event that is part of a 5-nation discussion around business climate leadership from around the world. And Mary will be joining participants from New Zealand, Japan, Hong Kong, and South Africa. And then over in the second week, already we're seeing that Arup, the leading global engineering firm, is undertaking some important programs of events with the WBCSD on net zero buildings. So I encourage you to go and look at the WBCSD website where you'll be able to see this information. All right, now let's move to who's joined us from Glasgow. And what I would encourage Matthew to do is unmute, as I just asked him to unmute. And hopefully he does, and he does. And a big hearty welcome to you, Matthew, if you would also like to open your video. And there he is. Thank you, it worked. Okay, Matthew, hello. Firstly, where are you? How long has it taken you to get to Glasgow?
I haven't even made it to Glasgow.
Oh my goodness.
I'm still at Kingsford Smith Airport and enjoying, well, the prospect of international travel matched by the reality, which is lots of forms and my God, the forms you have to fill. But you can't complain, I guess, in the context of borders opening up.
How exhausting. Right. All right. Well, let's move to your presentation, and in particular, a bit of a summation. And we've worded you up. Why are you going? What are you looking out for? And what do you expect to be involved in? So you let me know when to move the slides.
Yeah, so if you just go on to the next slide, Andrew, because that I think really just captures in terms of why I'm going. So why I'm going is wanting to be part of the Australian effort on nature-based solutions, climate solutions, to move from where we are now, which is having delivered 100 million credits over the last 9 years in the Emissions Reduction Fund, and to increase that and put us on a trajectory to doing our bit. And there we want to hit 1 million tonnes over the next 9 years. So that's an order of magnitude increase. And there's already been pulled up short in terms of, well, is that realistic? And what's all this with offsets projects in any case? But this needs to be put in the context of the carbon farming initiative, the current emissions reduction fund. When it kicked off in 2012, the thinking then was that only in the order of 10 million credits in total would be delivered by 2020. So we've actually an order of magnitude more than that. So we're now at 100 million. And because of that milestone, we now can talk in terms of delivering 100 or more than 100 million, 10 times that, 1 billion carbon credits by 2030. And what this map shows is just the extent of nature-based solutions across Australia. So the areas in blue are our Savannah projects, and that's where the 100 millionth credit was actually issued to the Willingen Fire project run by the Ngarran people. And I think the Savannah projects themselves have a really special story to tell about Indigenous land practices. And these aren't just offsets projects. These are enabling business models to get Indigenous people back onto country, caring for country, using innovative techniques to control wildfire management. There's 32 odd Savannah projects that have delivered around 9 million credits to date. And there's almost contiguous wildfire management across the top end of Australia. The light green colours are vegetation projects, native forest regeneration. And what these really speak to is the 800 or so farmers who put up their hand and said, we're actually going to manage our land differently. We're going to manage it for dual dividends of not only environmental outcomes, but commercial outcomes as well. So you can't just talk about offsets projects in the abstract, because what behind each offsets project is a farmer, a leading innovative farmer, landholder, a rural community that's saying, we want to do better, and we want to, improve our management to not only sequester carbon but deliver those environmental co-benefits. The project's in green, in red, and then they're the soil carbon projects, and they're the fastest growing category of projects. So really, Andrew, this is just a snapshot in terms of what's been achieved and where we want to achieve. It's all about finance, and so the reason why I'm going to Glasgow is to speak to a whole bunch of investors about getting more finance, pumping into the nature-based solutions, pumping into the climate solution space. And is this where I get to say you're on mute, or I've just been talking to myself for the last 2 minutes?
No, I win the award. I should do that.
G'day Glasgow bingo.
The fossil fuel award and the you're on mute award. So let's bring in Mardi McBrien. Mardi is another Australian. She's the managing director of the Climate Disclosure Standards Board, and she's all dolled up, ready to go out for dinner, except she's on the other side of the world. She's actually headquartered out of London and is attending a summit. Mardi, a big hello, love and kisses from Australia. Give us your first impressions of the journey to Glasgow, and are you at COP right at this minute?
Okay, Andrew, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Australia, and thank you for having me along, Andrew. Great introduction. I think even I learned a thing or two in there, so thank you for giving the context. So yes, I'm in Glasgow. I came up on Saturday, which means on the train, which means I missed the flooding on Friday and the power cuts yesterday due to the storms on the cutting down the line. So I am safely in Glasgow. I have my COP pass. I have gone through registration. I've gone through the 3 layers of metal security to get there, shown my COVID test on my phone, done all the rest of the registering, navigated through. It was pretty seamless, I must say, for the amount of people. It was really quite busy. But it was really seamless, lots of social distancing, lots of face masks, lots of sanitizer, and really, really friendly. I know I'm outside London. Everywhere you go, everyone's so lovely. And the city really has turned it on. Everywhere you turn, there's, something else to remind you of why we are here, whether that be from the third sector's perspective, great big lights shining, with really key messages around coal, or people on the street silently standing there with a placard hoping to influence some of the negotiators.
Wow. Okay, so the sense at the moment is that the COP is very much poised on complete and utter failure or complete and utter success, and a number of commentators, including good friend John Connor at Carbon Market Institute, really called this out quite accurately this morning by saying, hang on a second, before we start catastrophizing this as great success or great failure and consign it to the history of the Copenhagen conference of 2009. Let's get clear about what's going to happen. What do you think? What's your sense at the moment of what is the reality of what's going to happen?
Look, Andrew, my focus is around the climate finance space, and I expect on day 3 and 4, we are going to see some significant announcements around action that the market is taking, whether that be private sector finance that's coming together with multilaterals to really start upscaling what Matthew's looking for. I suspect we're also going to see, and in the world's worst kept secret, we will see the G20 and G7's endorsement of their Sustainability Standards Board potentially come to life, which is hugely exciting for organizations like CDSB. And I suspect we're going to obviously hear a lot more about the carbon markets in those 2 days as well.
So a busy time, and really very little time to sort of pause and reflect. And I often think that that's one of the dangers of the COP itself, that people don't really have that moment to think about it. Both of you have been to the COP. Matthew has been a number of times, as has Mardi. Your sense of the flow of a COP, commentators over the years, including myself, talk about, let's wait until Thursday when the G77 in China decide to blow everything up and threaten to walk away. And I forget what the other key issue is that happens on a Tuesday in the second week. But what's your sense of this COP? Would you categorize it as Copenhagen at the moment? Would you categorize it as Paris? Or is that just too binary in terms of the way the importance of this one, which is the 5th year after the Paris Agreement, and people really should have done their homework in one sense. Matthew, why don't you go first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Andrew. So in a way, you almost get the feeling it does feel a lot like Copenhagen, but there I'd be saying that in Copenhagen, it was perhaps governments who were way out in front of industry. And now I think the positive thing is that industry is certainly showing a lot of leadership, and in many ways is out of many national governments way out in front. And that to me was really brought home in Madrid, where for the first time oil and gas companies lined up behind net zero by 2050 targets, nature-based solutions, fair and just transition. So removed a whole path of that industrial, sort of commercial opposition. And now that the pace of change, I think, is really accelerating. So in many respects, I'm looking for the announcements on funding and the announcements from the private sector, because then that will accelerate progress. I think then that will provide the leadership and momentum. And in a way, the government pledges and targets are important, from a policy perspective. But in a way, it's that real-world commercial drivers and momentum that I think will carry the day and will be a key defining moment of Glasgow.
Yeah. Okay, good words. Mardi, I might hold off on you and get your thoughts later in the week, because you're both joining us on a number of occasions during the course of the 2 weeks. The question I want to ask both of you as a wrap-up is, what's your definition of a good COP? Mardi, first to you.
I think very much what Matthew just said, if the money starts to move, if we are getting those private finance signals on the multilats that are ready to go out and commit and to help make this happen.
Excellent answer, and it was short. Matthew.
Oh, I think Mardi put it perfectly. So can I just say ditto? and then
I mean, this is the money COP, right? This is the money COP. We know it's been coming. Absolutely. It's been coming for years, and whether or not we get everyone commits to sticks to the net zero, whatever happens, if the money doesn't start to move now, then it is going to be a failure. But I think we truly are going to hear the money is going to start to move, and I think we're going to hear that in week 1, Andrew. And I think if we start to really get the momentum that the private sector, the private market, everyone is getting behind it, then
I think we may have lost her.
And I just saw in the chat box, HSBC 750 billion to 1 trillion by 2030. So yes, that'll definitely give everything a good kick along.
Very much so. Well, thank you so much to both of you. I'll leave you to both close off as I close out. And as I said, we will be hearing from both of them during the course of the 2 weeks. I'm very excited that they've been able to join us in the commentary position. Before you go, I want to get your view on what is a good COP. And to do that, I will be launching a poll. And I'd encourage you all to give us your thoughts, and we'll share them tomorrow, on what you think is a good COP. Is it the keeping of the goal of 1.5 degrees, stronger nationally determined contributions, mobilising the money as in client finance? That's interesting. Efforts to tackle the methane emissions, finish the rule book, reduce coal use, adapt to protect our communities and our habitats, or sort out the rules for carbon trading, which has been a big discussion over the last year, particularly as it did not succeed in negotiations at the last COP. We might give it a few more minutes. Furious responses positive responses coming in. Don't forget it's multiple choice, so you don't have to pick one. You can pick as many as you wish to do so. We're coming up on the minute mark. I might just give it another 10, 15 seconds after that, and then I'll shut it down and give you an insight into what people have decided. Coming up to 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, let's end the poll and see what the response has been. Sharing the results. And hopefully you can see them. And if you can't, what I'll do is just shout out. So single biggest response was keep the goal of 1.5 degrees of global warming within reach, closely followed by strongly nationally determined contribution, mobilising $100 billion in climate finance per year. And almost in fourth place, actually, reduce coal use. So we're almost at the end, and I was hoping Tony Gourley would actually be with us, but I can't see him either in the room or online. So I might just call out this very exciting conference, which is starting tomorrow. It's the mini-me to COP26, being held both physically and virtually, primarily virtually though. And if you haven't registered already, strongly encourage you to do so. BCSDAustralia is a supporter of this conference, and we're very excited that Tony and his team has put together a brilliant program of speakers and moderators, even me's talking at it. So without that being thought of, and I've just lost my train of thought, I will move on. That's it. Conscious of time, and thank you so much for joining. It was a bit of a stop-start for the first one, but I'm sure, as with all COPs, we'll get the logistics well and truly sorted out for the next one. Don't forget, tomorrow, you'll join myself, Mardi, once again, Melanie Bishop from Macquarie University, and hopefully Tony Gourley will be able to join us. And wherever we can find Richie Merzian, wherever he is in the world, I hope he does dial in. Don't forget to use the same Zoom link, and tell your colleagues to register on the website if they would like to join us as well. And the final reminder is respect the science, respect nature, and above all, respect each other. I'm Andrew Petersen. Thank you for joining. Goodbye for now.